This is the Insider's Guide to Real Estate. I'm your host, Victor Normand, and today we go inside clutter. My guest today is Laura Moore, who is a personal coach, a writer, a speaker, and a professional organizer. Her company is Clutter Clarity. Please join me in welcoming Laura to our program. Laura, thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, let's start off by talking about Laura Moore and how you came to be a professional organizer.
Well, about 15 years ago, I changed careers from, I used to do marketing for small independent legal, financial, and medical firms. And I realized it wasn't personal enough. And I decided to sort of merge all of my interests, which happened to be beauty and balance and homes and architecture and people mostly. I wanted to work one-on-one with people as much as possible. And I knew this professional organizing business was blooming. This was way back before Oprah made it a constant part of the conversation. And I noticed that a lot of things about the profession were misleading. There's a lot of misconceptions. Mm-hmm. For example, the container is the solution, or that you need to have this, you attack your clutter and you do it once and for all. Okay. And there's a lot of misconceptions that the public are comparing themselves to. So I designed my business around a new model.
Okay, so let's talk about what's our definition of clutter in the context of real estate?
Well, clutter is what no longer adds value to your present life. It's not about getting rid of stuff. It's about choosing what adds value and what to bring into your life or your new home. Decluttering is the activity that you go through in order to decide what adds value and what to let go, and then how to let go in a way that actually feels good.
Okay. So you have a master's degree in education.
Yes.
So there's an educational component to what you do. Most of the time as real estate agents, we will approach a client who needs to get rid of clutter or stuff, and we'll give them what we think are options. We'll tell them that they can recycle things in certain places and tell them where the nearest Goodwill is and give them a coupon for a discount on a dumpster, but there's a lot more to it.
There's a lot
than
more
that.
to
So
it.
tell us about this kind of education component that you bring to the business.
Everyone who calls me is upset. They're either overwhelmed or frustrated with their repeated failure of getting the clutter out of the house. So it's not all about what to do, it's about how to get ready properly so you can do it at all. So the coaching that I have designed involves three components. One is emotional management, two is time management. Those are the two prerequisites to make it at least comfortable to do the decluttering. And so I coach people on how to stay out of overwhelm, how to ask and negotiate for help in their families, for example, how to go through the process and actually back off instead of push harder. The biggest mistake people make is to do too much too fast.
So what a real estate agent like myself would be focused in is physically getting the stuff out of there.
That's right.
But you're saying that you really need to, before you do that, you need to understand some things about yourself before you move forward?
Everyone understands that this is an emotional process, and working with realtors, I wish they would call me in a little earlier, 6 months, 8 months even, but people don't work that way. They want to put the house on the market and there's like a 3-month window, and that's really what makes it challenging. But often realtors bring me in to help the client do whatever they need to do.
Right. So what we're faced with is someone will come to us and say, I'd like to sell my house.
That's right.
And they will underestimate two things: how much stuff they have and how long it will take them to get rid of it.
That's right.
In the meantime, we're after them because of, as you mentioned, their market timing is an issue. So now they're at the breaking point. Now you come into the picture. So what typically what do you see when you first encounter somebody who is
the
frazzled?
panic.
Panic. Okay.
Well, actually, when I go into a home, I don't see anything wrong. I see the results of patterns of thinking and patterns of behavior. So naturally, there's a lot of stuff. So the time that we have, 3 months, 6 months, even 1 month, will make a big difference about our strategy. But I coach people on how to decide what is clutter, what is not clutter, and then how to let it go. And it does certainly help to have somebody like me next to them. But really what happens is, because I guarantee people enjoy the process, regardless of the timeline, they enjoy the process and the results. What happens is they regain confidence in their own decision making. And when we talk through the options, realistic criteria of deciding what clutter isn't or is, it starts to make sense to them.
Okay.
And that keeps the motivation going, and that's the emotional part.
Okay, so clutter is, it's common. I mean, there are, to one degree or another, we're all involved in accumulating things. I mean, that's the economy that we have is consumer driven. On the one extreme, you have people who are, it's almost pathological. They're hoarders. They can't get rid of anything.
That's very far on the spectrum.
And then the other spectrum where I'm probably sitting is just lazy. That if you have a basement or an attic or a spare room, it's a lot easier just to put something there and actually deal with it. So we're used to clutter, but yet when we go to buy a house, we don't expect to see it. So where's the disconnect there? Why are people, why can't we just leave a stack of magazines on the coffee table? Why does that have to
To sell
go?
the house?
Yeah.
Well, that's your standards. Actually, a lot of times when I'm staging a house, I'll do a lot of the internal staging, and then the magazines and the expectations are to clear it out completely. But when I worked with somebody in Acton, it was an old house. She'd been there for 55 years. Now, there was no way we were going to clear everything, but we made it very orderly and beautiful, but we didn't clear it out altogether, like the magazines. I think that's a little far-fetched sometimes, but everyone has their opinion about that.
Sure, and it is a standard that we in the industry have set. And often when you go into a house that has been staged, it's really clear that nobody can really live like this. I mean, that you know, that's just not normal. But yet it is the expectation. Like it or not, we have to deal with that. So, what are some of the specific techniques that you would use now that you've met with somebody, you've kind of assessed where they're at? What are some of the...
Well, I pay attention to how they're making sense and the patterns of how they like to get things done. And a few adjustments in how they're thinking can make a big difference. For example, they feel like something's wrong, or there's usually a high level of embarrassment. And I go, there's nothing wrong. This is just the accumulation of your life, and you just want to be present to your clutter and make the decisions with me. But you don't have to make it wrong to make it better. And that's really a potent starting point where people feel embarrassed. They go, okay, great, she's not judging me. And we make the decisions together. Now, time management is a huge part of it. So if there's only 1 month, I'm working with somebody maybe all day. But on your own, it would be really good to start as early as possible and do 2 or 3 hours a week to declutter your home. But with me, it actually gets done. And in fact, I'll bring in a realtor, or I'll bring in the trucks. I'll bring in whatever needs to be done. But my job is to take care of them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so you've gotten me calmed down that I can do this, and I'm not feeling guilty any longer. That it's you've managed to get me over that hurdle. But now,
how do you do it?
What's motivating me? Okay, now I feel better about this whole process. You've made me feel good. What motivates me to actually start getting rid of stuff?
Well, you reframe, you don't get rid of it. What I do is help people get into a position of power to choose well what is the best decision for them. And I teach them options and criteria to make those decisions. And then they start seeing that it starts to make sense, and then they get more independent of me and can work in between. But we don't get rid of stuff. That's what fills up our earth.
Okay.
We actually choose how to let it go in a way that feels good, and people are much more environmentally conscious. We actually get rid of very little of it. We choose to let it go, either donate, sell, give away, give it to the next generation, whether they want it or not, is a big piece of that. So it's all about, before all the doing is the deciding. Before the deciding is the thinking. And when I slow down with them and walk through the process, they start feeling very confident about what to do with their things.
Okay.
It's a thought process.
I can see that, and I can understand that, and your terminology, getting rid of it, I understand that implies any number of things. It could imply that you made a bad decision acquiring this in the first place.
Right.
And why do you have this?
I know.
And those are the kinds of things to stay away from in terms of getting people in the right frame of mind. Is that accurate?
Right. Well, books are a very common experience. I mean, thousands of books. I was working with somebody, they're downsizing to a continued care community, and he was a professor, so he literally had thousands, probably, I think 3,000 books in the basement, and he had to finally deal with his books, and he didn't want to. So I got him over that hurdle, and he went through, I said, you have 2 bookcases in your new place. And so he went through his books on his own. He wanted the privacy. And he did a really good job, actually. But I brought in a book buyer, and they basically gave him a $2,000 check. He was willing to sell the books and let go of the books when he agreed with this is a good decision, you see. But we didn't force him to do it. We got him ready to do it so he could. And he was, you know, he did say he felt like I was taking his arm off, but other than that, he actually really liked the check, and he skedaddled up to his other second home, and some of the books went up to his new home. So some went to the new home, some went to the old home, and some went to the book buyer.
Okay, so
and
he
was totally happy with that.
Yeah, there were two things that worked there. One, the books were going to someone who could use them, presumably, and
appreciate them.
And he got paid for it. So
the
combination of the two seems like a good working.
Exactly, but
dynamic.
at first he wasn't willing to let go of anything. But when we talked it through, he became ready.
Right. So I watched this program called The Pickers, and about these 2 guys who travel around the country and find stuff to bring back and resell. And almost always, they psychoanalyze, if you will, the person they're buying the stuff from. And one thing they do focus on is that this is now going to be sold to somebody who will appreciate it, who will use it, and that you can tell that really seems to get them over the hurdle of parting with things.
Well, and then there's the whole question of how to sell it. Do you do it on Craigslist or eBay or consignment or yard sale? So there's a whole nother series of questions that need to be walked through. And based on the reality of their stamina is a big piece of this, how much they want me to do versus they want their family to do, and whether they even have the skills to do it online and sell it, or they want to hire me to do it. All of that needs to be worked out, but in the process of slowing down to think it through, they get ready to do it, to let go. So it's not what was once hard no longer is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can understand that some of the things that we have just wear out, and it's an easier decision. Something breaks to get rid of it. I'll use the expression again.
That's okay.
But most of the stuff that we have still has utility to somebody.
Right.
And so that is where this whole psychological dynamic enters into it, where you find that person, or at least move in that direction.
Right, and what's really getting in the way is not the stuff. What really gets in the way is the person I'm working with is highly distracted by the rest of their life. I mean, realistic, and all that stress spills onto the stuff as well.
Okay.
The reason that a lot of this doesn't get done is not because they can't figure it out. I work with very competent people who are doing rather well in life, and they're completely overwhelmed by the stuff in the house. But it's because you have to create a priority to do the decluttering, but if your priorities are almost anything else, because truthfully no one really wants to do this decluttering, but then their life circumstances force them to deal with it, like a move.
Yep.
And then they come back, and it's a beautiful experience where they actually get ready to do it, and they can do it. But they don't understand that it's much more complicated than deciding what to do.
Sure.
So the time management that's the other piece. There's the emotional management and the time management, and realistic expectations.
Yeah. So how do you keep people on track?
They prepay me, and we set up typically week-to-week schedules, and I can work with people for 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks, months, or years. Okay? And it's very different for each scenario.
Sure. So as you speak, I'm thinking of situations I've been in and been a part of where you have somebody who is keeping you on track in one form or another.
Accountable.
Sure, and so we agree that in a week I'm going to accomplish something.
Right.
And
very often they don't.
And often, well, for me, often it's on day 6.
Right.
That
They know I'm coming
'cause
back.
I know you're coming, and
Yeah.
I don't want to disappoint Laura, so I'm going to get.
There
get
is
this.
that part.
That's unavoidable. I mean, there is a
Right.
connection there.
Right, but I create the container for them to be able to do the work week to week, or if there's more pressure, it might be day to day. But the reason why I ask people to prepay me is because I work in the world of procrastination, don't want to, can't make me.
Sure.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's the first hurdle, like this is really happening.
Yep, and money is a motivator, there's no question.
Well, it's certainly an accountable. They know that I'll show up, and then they will show up.
Right. All right, so we've been talking about kind of individuals, but sometimes there's more of a dynamic involved where you're dealing with a couple
Yeah,
where
very
they
much.
need to make this move, and they've been informed that they need to, or they realize they need to start to downsize and get rid of things, but they can't agree on how to approach
right.
it. So now you walk in, you come along, you get the panic call. You better go. You need to go talk to this couple. What's your approach when you're dealing with a couple?
Well, I'll give you the story of a couple, very nice couple. They loved each other a great deal, and they've been living in the house for 27 years. And they were renovating and then moving. And somebody they knew was moving in, and there was this bureau, and the woman, I was working primarily with her, and she looked at that bureau and she just turned white with sort of fury. She said, "For years I've been trying to get that bureau out of here," and asking her husband, "Can we just get rid of it?" It turns out that the bureau belonged to his first wife. Okay, so there's a little potency there.
Yep.
And so we brought her husband in, and we sat down and we talked it through. He had no idea she was still upset about this, or that it was even something to be a concern about. But she had tears coming down her eyes, and he loved her. He was sort of amazed. But we had to negotiate about how to let go of that bureau. And he came from French-Canadian lower middle class. She came from New York, Jewish, upper middle class. There was no way he was going to just get rid of that bureau. His needs and her needs needed to be respected. So we created a container, a decision, an agreement, where he had 2 weeks to decide to let go of that bureau. And he had the skills to sell it on Craigslist. I knew it wasn't going to sell, but it's not for me to inflict that. He really needed to go through that process. So he went through it, it didn't sell. And then I emailed the wife and I said, "Ask your cleaning lady if she wants it." It was gone like that. So the negotiation process is really critical. Mm-hmm. When I was working with 2 parents, elderly parents, and the daughter who was paying for my services and paying for the new apartment that they were moving into, she was ready to strangle them. So I asked her to go away for a month. I mean, have lunch or whatever, but don't talk about downsizing with them. Let me do that. And so we got humming right along, and they were still complaining, though. And I said, "Let's sit down and have lunch." And we sat down and we talked about the fact that, yes, you're sad about leaving your home, but I want you to appreciate the fact that you're going to one of the best places that the world has to offer right now. They had no idea. They just felt that they were a victim to their circumstances. And I said, "This isn't personal. This happens to all of us." Mm-hmm. And he particularly liked the world, the best in the world. And I said, "You're pretty close to it." Well, the next time I saw them, they were not complaining, and there was much less resistance.
Okay, so you changed their focus.
I changed their frame of mind.
Right, and that seemed to do the trick.
And I do say, a little less grumbling and a little more gratitude would go a long way. Mm-hmm. And they go, "You're right."
So now, what other...
Without the shame, without the embarrassment.
Yeah, what other family dynamics often come into play when somebody's trying to decide what to throw away or give away?
Well, I worked with one family here in Acton, actually. It was a really beautiful experience, actually. I worked with a very competent woman, but there was absolutely no way that she was going to do it on her own. we went through the whole house and separated the things that she didn't want to take with her but she thought of value. And I said, let's have what she called a pick and choose party, and her 3 sons flew in. And everything was arranged and organized, and they went through the house in silence, without their wives, by the way. It was just between the sons and the mother. And she actually took a nap on the couch while they walked around in silence and decided what they wanted. And there was only 3 or 4 items that they all wanted. And then we went into the negotiation process and weighed the pros and cons of who got what and what was most valuable. And it was very ecological. And then I said, I'd like you to go around the house and have your mom tell the story, the provenance of certain pieces. And I went to one son and I said, film this. This is your family memorabilia and you'll never lose it. So the getting rid of process turned into a family gathering where there was no loss at all.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So is it a common technique to photograph or record objects to make, as a way to get them out physically?
It is. Actually, you bring up an interesting subject around photographs. I worked with a elderly gentleman who's, again, downsizing, and he had lost his wife 5 years earlier, who had for years been saying, let's go through the photos, let's go through the photos. But she died, and so he couldn't get near the photos without feeling shame and remorse and regret. And so we talked it through, and I said, why don't we have a family gathering? And they had their last family gathering where people came from all over the world. Now, he and I sorted through the photos, separating the duplicates and the I don't know who these people are. Those became the subject of the family party. And while I was working with him, though, I pressed record, and he was telling stories about each photo, or many of the photos that we went through. So that became a transcription, and that became a booklet for the family to have forever.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
So I know of the story that I tell is of my mother-in-law, who was a picture taker forever, and had organized them into albums, and then later on she decided she needed to deal with her stuff, and so she split them up, similar to your experience, into an album for each of her 6 children, and that was her way of moving things out of the house.
That's right.
And providing something very, very important to the kiddos. And her attitude was deciding not to do this was making a decision. And I think that whether we're aware of it or not, a lot of us just think postpone, procrastinate, as you've said, and push off the decision to other family members. And that it's unfair, perhaps. And then also that the time that they're doing that may not be the right time.
Right,
and some
exactly.
things might be lost that need not be lost.
Right, I worked with one woman over the phone. 50% of my clients are over the phone. I never meet them. I never touch their stuff. Even just yesterday during the snowstorm, I had a first session with somebody, and she decluttered her papers that day on her own once I got her started. But when the children call me, the adult children, sometimes I say, it's too late. It is really going to be your responsibility. Let me help you get ready. But as long as your mother and father are alive, why don't you enjoy their company and leave them alone when it comes to the downsizing? Sometimes it just really does go to the next generation.
Sure. So getting things, it's really not, we're talking in terms of someone where time is important, where they need to move, they need to sell a property. But there's a lot to be said for bringing that discipline into your life, even long before you need to do that. And
right. Decluttering is a lifelong activity, and if you haven't done it, the house is going to fill up. It's just the way it happens. But if people started earlier, if they learned when they're 45 how to declutter and take care of their lives and bring their homes into balance, they won't get so stuck at 60 and 80.
Okay, so what are some of the techniques or the games we can play with our minds that puts us in the right frame of mind to either avoid accumulating these things or begin to deal with them? What are some of the techniques?
Well, every decision, we go through the process of every decision costs or replenishes your resources, time, money, energy, or space. And when I'm working with somebody, if you buy one more sweater or one more couch or one more, you're overstuffing the house. And the criteria is very important where they start realizing that, oh, this decision is actually costing them to bring something into the house. Now, when you're dealing with an affluent family that's living in a 5,000 square foot house, there's a lot of room to procrastinate.
Yep.
You know, and the storage units, the number of storage units in this country now fill the square footage of Manhattan two units high. So we need to respect and honor that we have like one body, one house, square footage, 24 hours a day. This is the greatest myth that people work with, actually, is that we go, I don't have time, I don't have time. Well, the truth of the matter is we all have time. We have 24 hours a day. It's the same for everyone. It's very egalitarian. So the trick is not to hurry. The biggest mistake people make is to hurry to try and get everything done. The truth of the matter is that if you choose better about your priorities and then place them in the calendar, time management can be as creative as choreographing your own dance. But you have to create the time, and you have to manage your emotions to be able to get near the stuff. But accumulation is just part of the problem. I do a workshop on the culture of clutter, and it makes perfect sense that we are in this mess. But you don't have to make it wrong to make it better.
Right. So the trick is to get into some habit of
Yes.
dealing with stuff.
Yeah, 2 hours a week, if you're not in crisis or not selling your house really soon. 2 hours, putter through your clutter. You don't want to attack it, just putter through your clutter. 2 hours a week will make a huge difference, and you build that routine.
Sure. So one technique I used with my children when they were young and was if they couldn't decide, it was something that from a parent's perspective didn't need, it was not worth keeping, but they couldn't decide, I just told them, let's put it away and revisit it. And revisiting it a year later, 2 years later, they've forgotten why they were attached to it.
And so do we. That's true for adults too.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's a big issue. It's directly related to our consumer-driven economy, and we're not going to get away from that.
Well, and we're not, and most of us are moving. So again, the good thing is that we are moving and our lives change. Our stuff becomes clutter as our interests and lives change. What was once just stuff, which is neutral, the decluttering process is bringing your home back into balance so you enjoy your days more.
Right. So good advice all around, something we all need to deal with regardless of whether we're selling our house or not.
Yeah.
So Laura, thanks so much for being here.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
And that's our program. Thanks for watching.